The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. We're back, episode 2. We are back with Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm your host, Laura Hayes.
And I'm Bridget Sahlberg. And today we wanted to share with you a little bit about smart charts and how they're very helpful within all different kinds of settings. So, Laura, do you see teams using smart charts?
I see some teams using smart charts. I see more teams using visuals. And so I think it would be helpful maybe to just kind of define what the difference would be for someone who's like, wait, a smart chart? What is that? What does that even mean, Bridget?
Right. So a visual would be something more generic, like wash your hands, hanging up in the bathroom, just as that visual reminder, like now we're going to stop and wash our hands. Whereas a smart chart could be the keystrokes to being able to say wash hands in that moment, so that we're breaking down a barrier of not knowing the exact keystrokes on a particular language system. So it gives the actual visual icons of navigating through the folders to say whatever targeted vocabulary you might need to have at your fingertips for whatever you might be doing. So whether it's wash hands or stop, I don't like this, or I need help right now. But kind of having that, visual, but also that actual keystroke pathway is really helpful for some of our users, but it's also helpful for the adults who are supporting them as well. So kind of breaking down those barriers is really helpful. And I had the opportunity to talk with Sara Duncan, who is an SLP in our VSP programming. So she's a speech language pathologist who gets to support vocational skills programming all across North and Central St. Louis County in our work sites. And I think that she does a lovely job of showing and telling us about how these students have real opportunities to use OGCOM in their, vocational skills programming. So let's dive on in and hear from Sara. I'm here with Sara Duncan, SLP. Sara, do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your path and your background in regards to AAC?
Sure. So my name is Sara Duncan. Currently, I work as an SLP in SSD's vocational skills program. This is a program for students ages 18 to 21 who are transitioning into a work environment. So it helps students learn hard skills and soft skills for success when they're at the job site. So for this position, I travel to a variety of sites throughout St. Louis County. I go to some hospitals, warehouses, nursing homes, hotels, and others, including those. And then the students that I work with typically work at janitorial type of positions, food services, customer service, and more. So I do have, I believe, 14 students this year on my caseload who use AAC, so quite a few. But in terms of my path with AAC, I was first introduced to OGCOM in grad school. And I remember my first client still. She was a little girl who had a pure Robin sequence. And so she had something called micronathia. Her jaw was very small, so she wasn't able to communicate verbally. And she used a Nova chat system. So that was my first kind of exposure to OGCOM, and it went really well. I got a good introduction with her. We also used some low tech, like board maker type of visuals in our sessions. And then at this time, there was still a lot of encouragement about hand over hand, which I know now is really not okay and is kind of a no-no in the OGCOM community. But at that point in time, that was what we were taught, which is interesting because it wasn't even 10 years ago. And so it's just kind of interesting to see how much OGCOM has changed just in such a short span of time. So after grad school, in terms of my exposure to OGCOM, I did my CF year in a rehabilitation hospital. So at that point, I worked with patients primarily who had strokes or brain injuries. And for my OGCOM use, it was mostly limited to low-tech use. So a lot of communication boards just that were hung in patient rooms. But for those of them who did have access to high-tech devices like on their iPads, we used a lot of like the Link Graphica for aphasia systems and just tried to introduce clients to the free apps that were available in case they didn't have access to more financially constricting applications. And so after that was when I started to work for SSD, and I actually started here in the vocational skills program where I still am. So, and at that point in time, my first year, I really only had like one or two students who had OGCOM on my caseload. So it was very different than it is today. And I was honestly really overwhelmed because I was introduced to some different systems that I had never used in the past. And I was also trying to navigate how to travel to all these different job sites and with these different teams and also assist these students. So what really helped me during that time was taking the PD courses that the OGCOM team offers, and I got to learn a lot more about some of the systems that my students use and learn a little bit more about how to program them and what goes into programming them. And over time, I feel like I got a lot more comfortable modeling on the devices and working with students who have a variety of different systems. I also feel like those PD courses helped me learn a lot more about presuming competence, letting students have their own voice, especially in the program that I'm in. And just being independent, because that's the whole kind of premise of our program, is helping these students gain independence for after they graduate from high school and VSP and go out into the world as adults. And so being able to program their own devices and use their own devices to create language in a way that they want to versus what someone else has just programmed in for them. So currently on my caseload, I have users who use TD Snap, Touch Chat, and Proloquo. The majority on my caseload who do use OGCOM have autism as well. So a lot of them are Gestalt language processors. And this has also been something new and eye-opening that I feel like I've learned a lot more about in the past couple of years. I did take that meaningful speech course by Marge Blanc
And
couple of
Alex
years back.
Zachos. Yep.
Yes, and Alex Zachos. And that was a super interesting course, as well as the course that SSD provided with OGCOM and at GLP. So
Yes, with my colleagues Laura Hayes and Jamie Kluby.
Yes, yeah. So that was an awesome experience for me, just because it gave me some new like strategies and tips to use with my students who are GLP, especially at this like adult stage where they might not have had a lot of access to that in the past as like younger learners.
Yeah. So Sarah, what strategies do you use to support those students who use AAC when they're transitioning from the classroom to the vocational skills programming? It sounds like, you've had quite the scope of kids.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like the main strategy that I think is super important is to just customize the device for each student. So not only customizing it with that work-based vocabulary, but also adding the names of their coworkers, the names of supervisors, even just outside of that, though, their own interests, because I mean, we all know at work, we like to have social time, lunch break. And so it's nice that they will have access to that device to communicate with each other outside of just those typical like hard skill workplace workplace learning experiences.
Yeah, that is so important to have that motivation to want to communicate with, whoever it may be that are communication partners, to take it a step further. And as SLPs and as teachers, that we're supporting those special interests, that we're adding that vocabulary, and that you said before, we're teaching these students how to do it themselves, because that next step is they're no longer in the school system, right?
Exactly. And I think too, just like having ownership of their devices and making sure that they can carry them with them throughout the workday is helpful. So, I mean, I think from that transition from high school to VSP, just for those teachers to encourage the students, like, this is my device. It's not something my para has to hold for me all the time, or I don't just only bring it out during speech class, but to have it throughout the day. Because I mean, a lot of my students, when they're at work, they're not with a support at all times. And so they'll need to have access to that so they can communicate with other coworkers or supervisors if they need to.
And that is something that I feel like it starts when they're itsy bitsy. And I worked in middle schools and in elementary schools, and it was like, okay, how as a team can we support this kid who is not yet holding the device, is not yet carrying it? But we know that this kid is one day going to be in high school, is going to be in a VSP program, is going to be in our working community. How can we, stair step it so that this kid has those skills when they leave elementary school, when they leave middle school? So it's so great to hear you say that, and, kind of help us all begin with the end in mind with that.
For sure. And I think too, it's just nice that you can access AAC from a variety of different devices. So, I mean, a lot of mine use iPad minis, but I've also had students in the past who have used iPod Touch, and I'm hoping eventually some of these apps will be able to be downloaded on their cell phones as well, so that they can just pull it right up when they need to.
Yeah, and that is actually coming in some of the devices. I have seen it with specifically LAMP and Touch Chat, but everything is pros and cons, because it then becomes teeny tiny icons that are very difficult to access. You have to have that vision, you have to have that fine motor, but that portability, that access, the lightweightness, we all carry our cell phones in our pockets all the time. So yeah, being able to have your voice with you at all times is utmost important. And Sarah, how do you collaborate with staff to integrate these AAC tools into daily activities of the program, and that you're ensuring communication remains both functional and effective?
So it's really important for me, just because I travel so much. I'm typically only at each site 1 to 2 times a week. So a lot of it is just kind of like we talked about, really encouraging them to have the device out whenever they possibly can. I also would encourage staff to become more familiar with the devices. So if they aren't, maybe taking an ODCOM training or researching information on the website, so they can model for students, because we know so many of our students learn just from us modeling for them, not doing hand over hand, but just getting comfortable with the device by us showing them like pathways if they need to learn. I also encourage, if they have access to it, using visual supports within their classrooms. So and the ODCOMP department has provided me with a lot of those tools as well, just posters I can hang on the walls. I use my little lanyard with my visual supports as well.
Love it.
Yeah, just having all those additional supports, not only just the high tech around, is super helpful. I also encourage the staff members, because a lot of them have really good relationships with the companies or places that the students are working at, to educate staff there about what this device is for, that it's not just an iPad they're bringing to play with, and it's only for communication. So it's not for other students to use or other coworkers to look at, but it's that their voice, and they will need this at the work site.
Yeah, which is awesome. And again, taking my experience as an elementary and a middle school SLP, how many opportunities did I miss that I could have done that? and gone into classrooms and educated just with that carryover for peer support, like you're saying in the VSP sites, that everybody's on working on the same page of like, this is their voice, this is how we support this student, whether they're peers or their teachers, their coworkers. It's so important to get everybody on the same page. I love that you shared that. So I feel like we've been kind of hinting at this, but what can teams work on in the school setting to best prepare students who use AAC to one day be ready to be in vocational skills programming?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is really, like we talked about, just getting students comfortable with their devices prior to even entering VSP. So whenever they have accessed that device, customizing it, making sure that it's up to date, not just having the same information as they were from when they were in elementary school, because a lot of times, I mean, as we get older, our interests change, and that about me page on a lot of those needs to be updated with their age and additional like classroom teachers. I think too, just making sure that students who are at the high school level or lower have access to all of the technology that they need. Because I have had some students come into VSP without access to those high-tech tools. And so it makes it a lot more difficult, I think, at this age and stage. Not that it's not possible, but I do feel like the earlier they have access, the better. So that way they can have more practice using the device, become more comfortable with it.
Well, and there's somebody that we collaborated and worked on that I'm specifically thinking of about how the student entered VSP frustrated, agitated, unable to self-advocate. And like, if this student came in with OGCOM, what a world of difference we've seen him grow and be able to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more willing to go with the flow during the workday, able to take direction a little bit better, just because that supports are in place. And to have a voice and to be heard makes just everything else in the day feel better, right?
Oh, totally. And I just saw that student today, and he's doing great. I mean, he's using his device to share not only work-related information, but he was telling me about his spring break. He told me he was watching TV, doing some video games. So I feel like just having that there, I would not have known all this information about him that I did prior to him having access to his device. So I think it's just like we've mentioned, super important for them to have access as early as possible and not to be afraid to reach out to the facilitators.
Yeah. And also, like, what I see sometimes with teams is the thought or the worry that, oh, this kid has OGCOM and they won't be able to be employed. So let's take this away and get them ready to be employed because he can talk or she can say a handful of words. She is understood at this level. But what you're telling me is, and what we've seen together is that no, we want students to have full, robust communication, because just being able to say a handful of words or just being able to say some rote scripting is not enough. And it's getting in the way of being fully employed and fully able to communicate throughout the day.
Totally. And I do feel like, and I know we've talked about this before, but just having access to those high-tech tools, if they're working on that verbal communication, I have seen such an explosion of verbal speech in my students who have access to that OGCOM. So, I mean, if that's what they're working towards, it's just a great additional tool to have. And it's really like we talked about too with the frustration at a work site. You need to be able to stay regulated throughout the day. And so having access to that communication tool to let someone know if you need assistance or support is huge.
Yeah, that's such a key way to stay employed, right? Can you share some examples of how you've modified or adapted AAC systems for students? You shared a little bit about that, but can you go in a little bit deeper?
Sure. So we did talk a little bit about, I do have some GLP processors on my caseload. And recently, something I learned in one of your trainings actually was the importance of using their preferred scripts or preferred interests as motivators for their device if that's something that might be helpful to them. So I have one student in particular who loves Thomas the Tank Engine. And so what I did, because he is not always motivated to use his device, a lot of times we'll do modeling, but he's not always motivated to use it independently. I found some Thomas clips that have to do with work. And it's Thomas actually saying it in his voice. So he'll say things like, all my work is done, or I'm feeling happy today. And it actually has the video of him as well when you click on the button. And I feel like since I added those just in one folder on his device, he's been a lot more motivated to use it just overall, just because it's something that he's interested in and motivates him. I also think that it's helpful, like we mentioned regulation a little bit too, but that my students know where their supports buttons are on their devices. And a lot of programs come like pre-programmed with these. Can't remember which one it is, but it has a sensory supports icon on the device. And so having students know where that is in case they do need a support at the workplace to ask if like they can have a break for some quiet time or use headphones or use a stress ball or something like that. Because
Yeah,
some of
and
those,
certain programs like TD Snap too even has like
yes.
visual timers within it that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes it's those little supports that make the big difference of staying regulated within the workday or in the classroom, right?
Definitely, definitely. So just using those and then also taking pictures of the actual jobs too. I mean, versus just the icons on pre-programmed into the device, using those so that it becomes more, I guess, meaningful to the students and they understand what they're selecting when they are.
Yeah, so having that actual picture of the washing machine instead of the
Yes,
icon, it's just that
yes.
more salient for that student. That's
Hmm.
awesome. I
Yeah.
love how you mentioned including media clips and that's so meaningful to that student. You know, it's those little tweaks that we can do. And I know it's time consuming as an SLP. I know it's hard as a teacher to want to get your hands dirty and your feet wet and dive into these tools, but it sounds like that's the real difference between a student feeling heard and wanting to communicate and sometimes not. So
Definitely.
thank you for sharing
Definitely.
that. That's
Yeah.
really awesome. One other thing that I was thinking of too is especially working with older students, slang too. You know, programming slang in
Yes.
there and having
Yes.
it, you know, be fun but still workplace
Hmm.
appropriate and kind of talking through that as well in therapy,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely. That's a great suggestion. And just like some of the, I mean, the new artists that they listen to for
Yeah.
musical, I mean, so many of my students will script like recent songs they've heard. And so
Hmm.
just knowing, okay, who sang that song and how can I incorporate that into my Ogcom device as well? So,
Love it.
yeah.
Well, what are some opportunities for growth and learning if a listener would want to learn more and really have a better understanding of preparing students for vocational skills?
So like I mentioned before, that meaningful speech course, I think, is helpful for all ages, honestly, from those beginning stage GLP learners to now, because I mean, we talked about they bounce between stages, and so some of
Right.
mine are still bouncing between stages. It's from 18 to 21.
And that's normal. And that's
Yeah.
how language works, right?
Yep.
And I will say not just the meaningful speech course, but like you mentioned before, our OGCOM department, our colleagues put on an in-person learning workshop that you can find through KickUp, that you can register and attend that. It sounds like you did and you enjoyed it.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it
Awesome.
was great.
Awesome.
You guys have so much knowledge. I can't thank you enough. I feel like since I joined SSD, just working with the OGCOM department and all the facilitators, I've learned so much more than I did. I mean, even in grad school, it's just it's nice to have that one-to-one interaction. And it's so great that you guys can come out to visit us and help us individually with students if we need it. So thank
Yeah,
you
I
for
worked,
everything.
you're very welcome. And I worked in a district that did not have this department. And when I changed to SSD, I felt so much more supported because, like you said before, it's overwhelming. And we take maybe a 3-hour course in grad school that just is like the tip of the iceberg. So we're happy to support you guys. We're an email away, and happy to come on out and observe and really get our feet wet and help, brainstorm and help tweak ideas. So that's
For
wonderful. Were
sure.
you going to say anything else about learning opportunities?
Um, in terms of learning opportunities, I mean, I do use a lot of the video modeling for my students who are in the workplace. Everyday Speech is a great online resource that I use, and SSD does have a subscription to that. If you are looking for any materials or tools, they have a lot that they've recently added in terms of interviews and skills that are more related to vocational use. But honestly, I mean, when I first started with SSD in this position, I could not find a whole lot of resources just specifically for this age group. So the 18 to 21-year-old population. So I created a lot of my own. I made a Teachers Pay Teachers
Oh,
page.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's called Vocational, Social, and Pragmatic Skills Store. And I have a lot of the PowerPoint lessons and activities that I use with my students on there.
Well, that's
Um,
great. Everybody should check that out if you're
yeah.
interested in, it sounds like vocational, social, and pragmatic skills. All of those are applicable to all different age sets. And it sounds like, you would be prioritizing like age respectful graphics and interests and all that good stuff, thinking about your students.
Yes, I try to, and I've been trying to update them too to make sure that they're more neurodiversity affirming recently,
Awesome.
just because I feel like even when I first started in this position, the world has changed a lot. And I also have a son who's on the spectrum, and I want to be as respectful to the autistic population as I can. So just making sure that all of my materials are affirming is something I've been really trying to work on as well.
Yeah, it's so important. And I feel like, as educators, as speech pathologists, embracing that shift is so important to make our students feel welcomed, to feel included, and to really be cognizant of what we're promoting and what we're teaching, the next generations, right?
Totally, totally.
Sarah,
Um,
can you share a favorite AAC moment with an AAC user?
sure. So I'm so excited about this. This happened just a few weeks ago before spring break. I was helping another student program some new staff members into his Ogcom device. And so I like to kind of program while I'm with the students if possible, just so they can see what I'm doing and they can learn how to program themselves if necessary. So this was at a North Tech, it's one of our work sites, and I was programming his device with him. Um, then I looked over at the student next to him, who was also in our group. She was independently programming her device to include staff members she worked with, without me even showing her.
Wow.
Yeah. And she made her own folder for it independently.
Wow.
So I was pretty impressed. And
Again, the
yes.
power of modeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was amazed. And I even mentioned to her teacher afterwards, I was like, I did not know she could do that. And she was like, I mean, that kind of goes with that presuming competence piece that we
Mm-hmm.
talk about sometimes. I was just so amazed and excited. And so just seeing that she could do that, I mean, thinking of everything else she could program on her own if she wanted to. So just being independent and letting those students have ownership of their devices is so important.
And I love that. And even for students who maybe don't have the fine motor skills to actually program it themselves, but then giving them a way that they can communicate, hey, that's not in my device. I'd like you to add it.
Yes.
Thinking through those different aspects of it. But what a powerful story and showcasing student autonomy and student voice. Sarah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I always appreciate everything you and the rest of the team do for us SLPs. So thank you for all the supports you provide.
You're welcome.
Laura here with another innovative activity for you. And this one's got a big one, but it's so fun. I couldn't not. It's called Alphabet Rockets. And you can hear all the rockets inside. It comes with, let's see, 3 plus. It has uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and 4 pictures on every single rocket. And I want to say there's at least 26 rockets in here. It's by Lakeshore. But here's why I love it. So I'm going to show you. They're all different colors. You got green, blue, orange, and red. And then you assemble the rockets. There are 3 pieces. You've got your base, which has a big letter, an uppercase letter, and a lowercase letter, big and little. You can tell I use descriptive vocabulary here, so we could talk through that, big and little. Bottom, and then the middle one is going to be pictures, so that start with that letter. So we've got a zebra on one side, and we've got a zoo on the other. So opportunities to talk about that. And then the top has another picture. So this is a zipper and a number. So you've got a 0 on the back. So we can build it up. We can talk about language. We can say we did it. We can count the pieces that we do. We can label the number at the top. So we've got 3 pieces. And, then maybe after we assemble it, we shoot it off, make some sounds, and talk about where it went. We can knock it down. We can do all those fun things. We can also it's airless in the sense that they all fit each other. So we've got an H with a green rocket here, and then I've put the tiger and the tie on top. So there's some opportunity for feedback if we match it with something that's not associated with that sound, right? If we're working on phonics and literacy. So if I put the tiger on the H one, I might say, uh-oh, that's not right. Tie does not sound like house or hand. So we get some natural feedback opportunities there, right? We can work on building it together. So we've got some fine motor carryover there. We can put them different places. We can talk about rockets and where we find rockets and where they go. And we can talk about that in science, right? So there's so much opportunity for carryover, so many things that we can build as within language on top of the things that we're already working on for academics. So I would highly, highly, highly recommend Alphabet Rockets for your classroom, not just for literacy, but for all those language opportunities and carryover that can come with it. So check them out.